Have you been wondering if a DAWless synth setup is right for you? Perhaps you've been curious to hear about some of the pros and cons of a computer-free electronic music setup. Well, you're in the right place because by the end of this video, hopefully you'll be able to better judge for yourself whether or not going DAWless might be something that's in your interest. Before we start, I do want to be totally transparent. I'm not totally DAWless, and I never have been. And I don't necessarily advocate for being completely DAWless. I personally use Logic Pro 10 as a DAW at the end of my signal chain, basically. And I use it for some basic sound shaping tools, EQ, light mixing, and I always have my published music mastered. The stuff I put on YouTube, I don't really bother mastering because I want it to have some sort of transparency. But I do use Logic as a tool in my signal chain, and I thought you should know that. So yeah, for performance, writing, composing, arranging, I do tend to be DAWless. Basically, this video aims to answer the question of DAWless or not in the context of that front-end music production and writing process. And I'm going to break it down into 5 reasons that I think that going DAWless in this framework can be really worth it for your creativity. Let's get into it. Reason number 1, portability. This right here is a totally DAWless portable music studio. Now, this might be the most obvious reason to go DAWless, but it's a reason that a lot of people choose to go DAWless. So I've had a few different DAWless rigs that I would all say are more portable than carrying a computer and an interface along with any other instruments. One being the Teenage Engineering OP1. Another one is my small modular skiff. I had a bigger 7U modular case, which I would also say could be a DAWless rig. So that, my smaller skiff, and then my Electron setup with the Digitact, Digatone, and Keystep. That might be the least portable, and it's currently my favorite just because of the sheer power that I feel like I can get out of it. But for my DAW setup, I am using an iMac, so it's not really that portable at all. A lot of you are probably using laptops, so it might not apply, but that portability feature is such a huge selling point for going DAWless. The ability to even just travel around with your electronic music gear is such a huge perk of not being tied to a computer or a laptop and an interface. Particularly because I think that removing yourself from your standard production or creative environment can really induce a lot more creativity into your workflow. I've brought my OP1 with me in the car, just like sat by a lake and kind of messed around and composed some stuff. And it's just a really good exercise to kind of get a blank mental canvas and reset yourself. And reason number 2 is the tactility of physical hardware. So this point aims to kind of look at the difference between hardware versus software. And for me, musical creativity was always rooted in playing instruments. I learned how to play physical instruments and acoustic music before I got into electronic music. So while I'm definitely able to appreciate the overwhelmingly abundant options and possibilities of creativity and applications within a DAW, I don't necessarily feel that creative pull. And in fact, it can be kind of overwhelming for me. Option paralysis is a real thing, and I know that a lot of people experience that too. This point kind of comes up a lot in the argument of DAW versus DAWless, but I use a computer all day at my normal day job, and I use a computer for entertainment purposes for YouTube and Netflix. And I use the same computer to edit all of these videos, and I put a lot of time into that. So when I actually am going to create music, I kind of want to separate myself from that environment because I can only look at the same screen for such a long time every day. For me, using a musical device that is specifically designed with a certain workflow in mind, really plays into that tactility and that creative workflow. That tactility can really be a breath of fresh air for me. I will literally sometimes just, as I'm walking by, click the buttons on the Electron devices because I love the mechanical keys. Does anyone else have that problem? But yeah, the physical nature of playing an instrument, electronic or not, is definitely just something that my brain has come to associate with the creative process and writing music. Reason number 3, the community or multiple communities surrounding electronic instruments. I hear that word a lot, the word community, used a lot in specific groups or niches of things on the internet, in forums, on subreddits, in social media. And it can be kind of strange to be like, yeah, what is it? Okay, it's just a group of people who are all into the same thing. But that's exactly what the beauty of it is. It's a really accurate word to describe the type of relationships that you can form with people who are into the same crap you are. I got pretty heavily into the guitar pedal community a few years ago on Reddit, and that bled into Instagram, and that kind of led me into the Teenage Engineering community, and that kind of led me into the Electron community. And I feel like I have different friends and acquaintances across the planet, really, in each of those different subgroups, which is just super cool, right? Like, that couldn't have existed even 20 years ago. Now, I'm positive that these communities exist for, soft synths too, and different DAWs and VSTs and whatnot. But I just wanted to comment on the very positive nature of the experiences I've had within these sort of hardware synth communities. You know, the internet can be a very overwhelmingly toxic space. I'm talking to you, Twitter. And I've just, as I mentioned, made some lifelong friends and some pretty close acquaintances through all of this music stuff I've been a part of. And that's both as a beginner when I was trying to get help, trying to learn how to use these devices and implement them into my workflow, and also as a more seasoned veteran on the internet forums, which is like the lamest thing ever to say, but it feels really good to be able to, you know, give back and help people out, and then make this content for you all to help you learn. So yeah, reason number 3 is basically internet friends. Moving on to number 4, performance. So as an anecdote, I've seen dozens of my favorite artists perform live with laptops as part of their sets, and this has never bothered me. I enjoyed the show just as much as I would have in any other context. But one artist, James Blake, if you don't know him, he's one of my favorites from back in the day. His vibe is very electronic, dub, jazz, choral. I don't know, there's so much going on in a lot of his music. It's very innovative in my opinion. But anyways, he tours with a 3-piece usually, at least when I've seen him. And I've seen him a few times. And every show, he always makes a point to talk about, you know, he thanks his band and he talks about how the process they do everything is with zero automation. They don't use any computers. Everything is happening in real time, which is super cool. And it takes a lot of preparation and a lot of courage to be able to do that as an electronic musician playing live. In my experience, electronic music can sometimes get a lot of flack for not being real music, or, you know, you're just playing back samples. And sometimes in a performance context, that latter part can kind of be true. A lot of musicians will use backing tracks and really long preloaded sequences that they're playing back. And in order to accomplish a lot of what is done with electronic music, that might be necessary. And especially for people whose, you know, resource is a DAW and a laptop, it's totally necessary. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the beauty lies in sort of the risks that are taken with performing everything live with physical hardware. It's generally more immersive, I think, because of that risk of failure that the performer is, you know, putting themselves in. For me, that just makes it a little bit more interesting to watch too, when you can kind of see a physical interaction between like the move per sound dynamic that's going on. Even if it's just holding out a synth chord and opening a filter slowly, it's like, yes, that's amazing. They're holding the pinnacle of tension literally in their fingertips. And I think there's something special about that. So yeah, performance, reason number 4 that I think it could be beneficial to go DAWless. And lastly, on to reason number 5, you might potentially want to go DAWless. You want to challenge yourself creatively, especially if you're super cozy and comfortable and familiar with a DAW, or maybe you learned on a DAW and you want to get into hardware synths. It might be a really good creative exercise for you to familiarize yourself with a physical standalone instrument. I even really surprise myself when I'm switching between different DAWless setups that I have that work independently of each other, how different the creative output is, and my even initial workflow and how I approach the challenge of writing a song. I can only imagine how drastic that difference must be if you are coming from exclusively working in a DAW to moving to hardware instruments for the first time. This kind of synthesizes all of the other points I've brought up so far. You know, changing your environment with a new physical object that you're not totally familiar with, learning from other people and challenging yourself performatively could be what you need to give yourself that extra mental creative push. Maybe you don't need to do a studio overhaul or throw your computer in the nearest river, but taking a synth you've never played to a spot you've never played in and just jamming out can really clear out your head sometimes. At the end of the day, that's what this is mostly about, right? Having a good time, making good, fun music, and sharing it with people who are going to get amped up about it the same way that you did. I try not to lose sight of that as much as I can. Well, if you learned something that you liked in this video, do me a favor and yourself a favor and go check out my Synth Hangouts playlist and chill with another video. I have some videos in there where I kind of just talk casually about electronic music and do some teaching and tutorial stuff too. So maybe you'll find something useful over there. Anyways, thanks for hanging out today. Peace.